What about like, well, let's talk a couple like Chris Rithrow and Ethan Martin.
Right.
You know, for all practical purposes, I think a lot of people expected them to do a little better than they did last year.
Right.
Are you satisfied with what they've done? Do you see growth there, or what do you see in the future?
For sure, I see growth. Anybody that knows much about the ballparks and the leagues knows the Florida State League, when Billingsley and Broxton and those guys are pitching on Florida State League, is a different league than the Cal League. Pitchers' ERAs are lower, batting averages are less. Cal League, you look, you know, your leaders are going to be well into the 300s. You play at Riverside, you play at Lancaster, you play at High Desert, you play at some of these parks. It's easy to see a kid's ERA creep up into the 5, especially if he has one outing that's bad or a couple of bad outings. They're still both athletic, physical guys, though 95, 96, 97 with good breaking ball. And they're young. I think it's always unfair to, just like if anybody that has multiple children will understand this, it's very unfair to compare your kids to each other. And so I think what happens when we have Billingsley, Kershaw, Broxton, these guys getting the big leagues at 21, they think everybody's going to get the big leagues at 21. Doesn't mean they're still not going to get a good big league pitcher. I mean, if you go back in the history of the 2 Cy Youngs last year, Roy Halladay and Lee, both guys made the big leagues, had to get sent back to the minor leagues, and then they came back up. Okay, so, and they were not who they are when they're 21, 22 years old. So fans in Cleveland were probably saying the same thing about Cliff Lee. They were probably saying, geez, he hasn't done what we expected him to do when he was in the minor leagues, and now Cliff Lee's a Cy Young Award winner. So I'm not meaning to say that Martin or Withrow's going to be Cy Young winners. They certainly have the talent and the ability to be there. Their arms are healthy, they're strong, they're athletic, they're bright kids, learning to pitch. We're not trying to rush them. So not disappointed in them in the least.
Where's a guy like Zach Lee going to start, do you think?
You know, that's a great question. Zach's pitched real well in spring training. I think everybody's, you know, if you talk to the coaches and everything, I think they would tell you they're real impressed with him as far as, especially mentally, the type of person he is and how tough a character he is. I could see Zach breaking with our Great Lakes club. That's to be determined. He wouldn't go any higher than that. But at the same time, I could also see him sitting in extended for a little bit while the weather warms up. And then seeing where it goes from there, seeing if he would go to Great Lakes at that point, or if he waits until the short season starts in Ogden. So be one of those two.
Let's talk about a success story that I think, you know, it's kind of overshadowed. I mean, people kind of just accept it and not realize what a great success story. That's Kenley Jansen.
Right. Yeah, Kenley's a great success story. I mean, you know, signing him out of Curacao years ago as a catcher, and the thing that that I want to point out to the fans and stuff is that when we sign a player, we you know, he was about 6'2" back then, and he was tall and skinny. You know, I mean, he had a little baby fat to him at the time, I would say, but we thought that he could catch. But Kenley really wanted to be a catcher at that point in his career. If we would have told Kenley, hey, we're going to sign you and send you as a pitcher, he wouldn't have signed with us. So sometimes we'll sign these guys, let them go play for a while at their position and see what happens. But the scouting people that were involved with it, Renee, Francisco, and everybody always thought Kenley would be a pitcher, probably. So I know it sounds crazy, but that's actually good scouting people. We usually know those things. So on the scouts, from the scout standpoint, I don't think people were surprised that he was able to take to the mound, because he was certainly looked upon that when he was a young player. But and I'm sure DeJohn's told you it was tough to get Kenley to even convert to pitch when we first went to him with it. It was pretty much like, hey, you're going to have to do this. And now he loves it.
What impresses me so much about him is his persona on the mound.
Right.
I mean, he gets that ball and acts like he can't wait to throw it again.
Correct. I mean, he's very competitive on the mound. He's a big teddy bear off the mound. I mean, my family and son, they're very close with him. They love him to death. He is an absolute wonderful human being. He's very low key. He's not a big nightlife guy or anything. He just soon stay at home and watch the NBA basketball games and things like that. He's a kid that isn't full of himself or anything like that. And you wouldn't know how competitive he is until you see him in a game. But when he gets on the mound, he's unflappable and doesn't get frustrated. And bounces back, and he certainly knows he can pitch there.
Could we teach John Broxton some of that stuff?
I think that's unfair, Mark, on your part, to be honest with you, because Broxton was damn good for quite a while, and I think it's tough to, I think sometimes as human beings we're unrealistic on people. I know it's a sport, people are getting paid, but Broxton was pretty good for a number of times, and so had a rough time last year. Everybody goes into that confidence thing and everything, Mark, with the Brox gets, everyone wants to say it was this Matt Stairs thing, this, and I can relate. I understand where he's coming from with it, but I do think that Brox is a hell of a lot tougher than people sometimes realize. To me, it had a lot more to do. It's like anybody, take any pitcher that's pitching poorly, his confidence is not the same. Mm-hmm. And so the confidence thing comes when you're not doing as well as normal. And stuff. And I understand your question. I'm not trying.
Well, no, I appreciate what you're saying. I like people disagree with me too.
Yeah.
I've consistently for 3 years have not liked his persona though.
Right.
I have felt like he doesn't exude confidence on that mound.
Right.
I've just felt that way. Now,
right.
I'm constantly reminded, look at his stats and all this stuff. But
right.
It's not something I just started beating his drum when he had a bad year last year.
I think though, in reality, I think this is true. I think if you're looking at him compared to Gagne, you guys, we're spoiled as Dodger fans.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Really look at a lot of the other closers around baseball. Look at Lidge. People said the same thing. Oh, Lidge lost his confidence, then exuded the persona. Traded to Philadelphia, and he helps them win a World Series. So I think it's with closers, got to be careful with that. I agree. I can understand your feelings with it a little bit, and I don't want to sound like I'm everybody thinks I'm just pro the guys that we signed here. But I do know that it's in that man's gut to be real good. I know him very well, and I think that he doesn't like to fail and stuff. And I do think that he's battled, but he's a different kind of pitcher. Everything's hard on one. It was off the chart, absolutely off the chart. So I think that John gets put in that shadow a little bit, sometimes. And like I said, I just hope that he comes back this year. I'm going to turn this thing off. I'm sorry. I just hope that he comes back this year.
And shuts me up.
I'm hoping. Because I'll remind you for sure. I'll definitely remind you.
You know what? I hope he does too. Right. If he has a good year, that would bode very well for the Dodgers.
Yeah, absolutely. And when he was a setup man, he was outstanding. And then he got moved into the closer role. But I know John personally. I don't think it's a confidence issue. I think for him, it's always a stuff issue. His stuff. If he loses a few miles on his fastball, he's not as effective. Nobody is.
Why do you think the second half of last year he seemed to have lost some velocity on his fastball? And I know it's early in the spring now, and Honeycutt and Mattingly both said that his velocity was the same this year as it was in 2009. Right. But why do you think he lost velocity?
Well, I think the kids threw a lot over the course of 3 seasons when you look at it, and he's a power guy. Power guys can't. I think it's harder for power guys to constantly go out and repeat every day and stay as fresh as it is maybe a guy with like Hoffman when he used to mix in the great changeup, Gagne, those guys. So I think that's part of it. He threw an awful lot in a 3-year period, and so I think that was part of it. Going to the All-Star game for the first time, those things come into play. And for me, he just wasn't as sharp or as crisp. For me, and being a scout, people can tell me that velocity's the same or whatever, but my eyes tell me different. Okay, and I watch him with my eyes, and I see his stuff's not as good. It wasn't as good the second half last year as it was early. Now, spring training is tough with Brox because he has historically never been a hard thrower in spring training. He's always been 92, 93 in spring training, and then the season opens and he's 98 to 100. But if he's not up in the upper 90s to 100s, it definitely, he loses a little something there. And then you're not as effective, blow a game or two, and now all of a sudden everybody's saying your confidence isn't there. So
you see this maybe as just a blip on a radar rather than a trend?
I'm hoping for sure that that's the case, and I know hope's never a good word in our business, but I've seen that with a lot of closers. Just as an example, like I gave you, where they have a rough year and they get shipped out, and then they go somewhere else, and boom, they're lights out. Closing's a tough business. Mm-hmm. It's tough because perfection. I mean, the closers have gotten so good in their one-inning stints that they'll close out 46 out of 50, 51. That's pretty good. And of course, the other thing is you got to look and see what kind of situations did they close out. I mean, I think the stats can be misleading. I know one year a guy had almost 50 saves, and he had a real lucky season. I mean, my gosh, he had runners on base every time and everything else, and then the next year proved to be he wasn't even close. And some guys will have a season where they come into the games all the time with nobody on base, and they get through them, and boom, boom, boom. And then, you look at some other guy, he's coming in with guys on base a lot more. So those things all play into it, too.